Our story starts in the waning years of the 12th century Livonia. In 1184, Meinhard of Segeberg arrived in Ixkile with a mission to convert the pagan Livonians. In 1186, he established the bishopric of Livonia. At first, the indigenous Livonians, who had often been under attack by their neighbors, welcomed the newcomers as useful allies. However, relations soon soured, and Meinhard's attempts to convert the pagans failed. He died a broken man in 1196. After failed attempts at peaceful conversion of the local pagans, the newly appointed bishop, Berthold of Hanover, decided to dispense with the cross and take up the sword to bring about their conversion. Berthold arrived at the mouth of the Dvina River with a large crusading army in 1198. However, he insisted on riding ahead of the crusaders and was killed by the pagan Livs in the ensuing battle. To avenge Berthold's defeat, Pope Innocent III issued a bull declaring a crusade against the Livonians. Albert von Buxtehude, consecrated as the new bishop in 1199, arrived the following year with a large force and established Riga as the seat of his bishopric. Up until then, the crusades in the Baltic lands had been seasonal. Every year, a contingent of crusaders arrived in the pagan lands, looting and forcing conversions. However, all the pagans had to do was wait until they left, and then they would rise up again. To establish a permanent military presence and help garrison the new lands, Albert founded the Livonian Brothers of the Sword in 1201. The organization of the Livonian Brothers of the Sword mirrored that of the Knights Templar. Members were required to be of noble birth and to take vows of obedience, poverty, and celibacy. The order also included soldiers, artisans, and clerics as members. The knights formed a general assembly which selected a Grand Master and other officials. The Grand Master served for life and chose a council and a military chief for each district castle where the order's knights resided. Nominally, the order was under the control of the Bishop of Riga, and as per agreement, they were to retain 1/3 of all future conquests. It looked good on paper, but in reality, it didn't take long before the order went rogue. According to a local chronicle, the order members were rich merchants who were banned from Saxony for their crimes, who now expected to live on their own without law or king. Most members came from northern Germany. It was a collection of roughnecks and adventure seekers who found the frontier of Livonia more suited to their temperament than the civilized German lands. For Albert, the order turned out to be a necessary headache. On one hand, it was an unruly bunch of misfits who weren't easy to control. Their first Grand Master was killed by a fellow member with an axe, and as time went by, there was almost no crime they were not accused of. However, on the other hand, they were willing to take on the pagans, and over the following years, they fought successful wars in conditions that left no room for mistakes. By 1209, they had secured and fortified the Dvina Valley up to Jersica, subdued the Livonians and the neighboring Lets. From 1208 to 1218, they subjugated the southern Estonians and fended off rival powers from Lithuania and Novgorod. The arrival of Danish crusaders in northern Estonia drew the borders in this direction for the time being, and in 1222, the Estonian lands were partitioned between Bishop Albert and the Danes. From 1223 to 1224, both the Order and the Danes were busy dealing with the Estonian revolt. In 1227, Ossel was conquered, and the Curonians were subjugated by 1231. Within 3 decades, the Livonian Brothers of the Sword had helped conquer a territory roughly consisting of modern-day Estonia and Latvia, while their number of members never exceeded 120. Despite their bad qualities and rough behavior, in the eyes of the bishop and his fellow Christians, the order had one redeeming quality. They knew how to fight and effectively use every advantage they had. Stone forts were the most important, followed by body armor, crossbows, and large catapults. Additionally, the order was adept at playing indigenous tribes off against each other, a crucial tactic for their success as they were never numerous enough to take on the heathens alone. However, it wasn't long before the same order started causing trouble for the recently converted tribes and the bishop alike. The yields from the conquered lands were small and wars were expensive, so the order began to extort more from the conquered tribes, causing widespread discontent and revolts. After being rebuked by the Pope, they seized the Danish lands in Estonia. The papal legate intervened and they had to give the lands back to Denmark. But as soon as the legate left, the Sword Brothers kicked out the Danes again. The order also started encroaching on the bishop's land and eventually levied tolls on the divina. This unruly behaviour generated numerous complaints to the Pope. However, the papal legate, who was sent to resolve the matter, ended up in an open conflict with the order over the city of Reval. In the ensuing battle, his own knights were beaten and he was taken prisoner. The order also massacred all the monks in the city as they had sided with the Pope. By the 1230s, the Sword Brothers were hated by the subjugated tribes, local bishops, merchants, and even the Pope in Rome viewed them unfavourably. Feeling the pressure, the Sword Brothers tried to persuade the respectable Teutonic order to accept them as brothers under their wing. However, after an inspection, the Teutonic order reported back that the Sword Brothers were people who followed their own inclinations, did not keep their rule properly, and merely wanted to be given free rein without having their conduct scrutinized. The Teutonic order refused to assist them without papal permission, and this permission was not forthcoming from Rome. Meanwhile, despite all the quarrelling and killing of Christians in Livonia, the order was still very much engaged in fighting against the heathens. Now the main enemies were the Lithuanian pagans to the south of Livonia. In the summer of 1236, the Grand Master was persuaded by his crusading reinforcements from Holstein to launch an invasion into Lithuania. They marched as far south as Saule, looting and raiding. However, on their northward return, they encountered a determined group of enemies at a river crossing. Unwilling to risk losing their horses in the swampland, the Holsteiners refused to fight on foot, forcing the knights to camp for the night. The next morning, the main pagan force arrived, and the crusaders soon discovered that the Lithuanians were made of different metal. The entire crusading army was annihilated, cut down like women, according to a German chronicle. Grandmaster Fulkwin and 50 of his knights were killed. And just like that, the story of the German roughnecks in Livonia ended with one battle. The survivors were placed under the rule of the Teutonic Knights, who took over the defense of Livonia. All in all, it was a great defeat for the crusading forces, but there were probably quite a few Christians who didn't shed too many tears over the fall of the order. Thus ended the story of the Livonian Sword Brothers, a very small band of German adventure seekers who managed to conquer and hold more land for Christendom than many of their larger counterparts.